Good morning, almost afternoon, everybody. My name is Devin Shapiro. I'm a first-year MBA at Sloan, and I'm excited to present this workshop presented by Rakuten, using Tableau to rapidly deploy visualizations. So please give a hand to Mark Bashik.
Thank you. I guess the microphone is working. We're going to do a live kind of demo here of Tableau. We're going to build out a dashboard that we use about 81 times a year at the A's. And we're going to use some real source data. So if you want to play along, here's the link. You should be able to download a zip file that has everything we're going to reference. And you obviously need Tableau desktop available to you. So I'm going to get going here. So like I said, my name's Mark Bashik. I've been with the Oakland A's. I'm about to start my 8th season. I originally worked for a gas station company in Atlanta, Georgia, a retailer doing business analytics, and was fortunate enough to present here at Sloan in 2012 a paper on college basketball. And that was kind of my switch into sports. And so I'm very fond of this conference and really excited to show you guys some of the work we're doing at the A's. So we have gone through a few iterations of BI tools. I've used Cognos and MicroStrategy at old jobs. We had a Click implementation at the A's a few years ago, and we've switched to Tableau, and specifically Tableau Online. About a year and a half ago, we've been really happy with that migration. Just some quick highlights. We have currently 119 active users. We have over 100 data sources. And we're seeing about 10,000 views a week on our platform. And I think as we do more and more development, we're going to see those numbers continue to grow. Some of our standard reports, just the kind of things we do, we call it the Package Sales Digest. That's kind of our huge overview of season ticket sales, new, renewed, by price level, by just kind of every little way you could look at it, by sales rep, by service rep. And it's a very common report. If there's ever an issue, we have a couple sales managers who are very prompt to let us know. We have something we call enterprise metrics, and that's something that has been a big change in the organization that I've really enjoyed to see. We've got some new executives, our new COO, Chris Giles, and we're very transparent. Everybody, every sales rep, every coordinator, everybody in the company, whether you're in marketing, community, sponsorship, stadium finance, whatever it is, has access to these high-level enterprise metrics that maybe in the past were a little more siloed. So if you want to go see how our corporate sponsorship team is doing, if you want to see how many community hours we've put out there, if you want to see the predicted attendance for the next homestand, whatever it is, it kind of sits in this one high-level workbook that we're really, really proud of. We have the Today's Game app, which I'm going to show you a version of that today, and something we call our sales rep dashboard, which combines everything from their own sales, we're calculating commissions hourly, to things with like a stadium visualizer so you can see maybe where your groups are today that are coming out to the game. This is a screenshot of another report that our team, Danny and Luke, Danny's here, they made these reports, and it's just a really handy tool to look at different campaigns and understand what's happening. You can look at them by different campaign type, whether it's a transactional list, whether it's a list we purchased, something inbound, and look at our different verticals, everything. Just a really good, clean example of what you can do in Tableau. So I had it up earlier for the people that got to the room ahead of time. This is our link to a zip file that I put out there for everyone to download. Basically, you download this file, you're going to get about 5 or 6 of our source files, and just put that on a place on your local computer and get started. So I've already downloaded the file, and I'm going to get started. So I've got my Tableau desktop open here and my notes. And what we're going to do is, we're at the start screen. There's really a lot of different things we've been working on. You can connect to different Tableau server, different data sources. And honestly, most of the time, our data sources are either already published or we're connecting to SQL Server, which is what our data warehouse is on. For the purposes of this demo and to kind of keep everything moving along, we're going to use a bunch of text files that are already there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to connect to a text file. So on my desktop, I've got it here. And the first thing here, we've got 5 CSVs available. You can see a couple different names, D_events, seats, F_sales. and two other tables there. The naming convention there with the F and the D is kind of a standard data warehousing practice of separating out your dimensions and your facts. So a dimension is something that you might sort or group by. It's hierarchical data. Seats and events are really clean examples of those. So dimension events has event, opponent, promotion, all sorts of stuff. For the seats, you can see where it is in the stadium. The F, the fact sales, are our sales transaction data. So facts or measures are things that you can aggregate and kind of measure. So we're going to start with that. So I open this up. And we can see here you've got a bunch of different columns: buyer types, ticket prices, order numbers, transaction dates, barcodes, what have you. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click into sheet 1, and we're just going to get started here. So before we start doing other measures, I'm actually going to add in one other table. So I'm going to go back into here and load dimension seats. And so we can see here every seat, I can see both the row, the section, and the price scale. There we go. And for note, this is actual data from our game. We have a spring training game in a couple of hours. And so this data is actually for today's game, which is going to make it fun. So I'm going to go into our fact sales, and the first thing I'm going to do is create a new measure. So we have ticket count, which everyone can see here. I'm going to show it as a cross tab. But there's a lot of comps for this game. It's actually our ownership weekend, so they blocked off a lot of seats and some other stuff. So I don't care about how many tickets we have. I want to know how many paid tickets. So what I'm going to do is write an if statement and say if ticket price is greater than 0, then 1, else 0 ends. So what this is doing is just basically checking anything more than a 0 is a paid ticket. Whether it's a cent, a penny, $100, what a 10, 20, anything greater than 0 is paid. So we're going to call it that, paid ticket count. I'm going to double click it here, and I'm going to add it to our sheet, and I'm actually going to remove the ticket count. You can actually see it's a pretty big discrepancy for this game, much larger than most. So we're here. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to dimension seats, and I'm going to add price scale. So our spring training stadium is a lot smaller than our regular season stadium. It's got about 8 to 10 price scales. And so I'm going to add it. And what you can see here is I've got this star here. So what's happening is Tableau has this concept of blending, which is essentially an inner join compared to normal database lingo. And it knows that these two tables have a seat ID column that are the same. But you notice this paperclip here is kind of unlinked. And so when you click that, it reads the data and instantly can take all the seat IDs from the fact sales and map them into each price scale. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to turn this into a chart. I'm going to take the seat ID out of there, right here. And this is overall pretty good, but we typically like to color code things. And so I'm going to drag price scale on top of color. So now we've got just a little bit better looking chart. Something else that we can typically do, and Tableau has the ability to change how you sort and use data to as your sort columns. But for the purposes of this demo, we're going to go into default properties and sort, and you can sort manual. So these are all of our price scales, and what I'm going to do is put our best price scales at the top. So that's our infield box and our infield box gold. I'm going to take our standing room only seats, put those at the bottom, along with our suites and our lawn GA, but then bump them up a little bit. So now we've got just kind of, we're so used to looking in the ticketing system and other reports to kind of have these, this is like the default sort in our head. So we always make sure to go through this versus sorting alphabetically or other stuff. So it's, for the people, especially in the box office, some of the other management that uses the report, having that properly sorted is a big help. So now I'm going to go in here, I'm going to rename this sheet sold by price scale. And I'm going to hide, this is just kind of a design cue. I want to use this field label for the row. So we've gone through, we're at the 51-minute mark, and have our first report. So I'm going to come through here. I'm also going to use fit width. You can adjust the view depending on whether you want to fit the width, the height, the entire view. We're going to use this, and this is going to help us later when we put this onto a dashboard. So we're good with that. The next thing I'm going to do is build a measure about our average ticket price. So I'm going to come down here and create a new sheet. And And the first thing is on the fact sales, I could come in here and look at our ticket price. I'm going to, again, do a cross tab. But instead of looking at sum, look at average, $26.27. While that's correct by definition, I'm really only focused on the average ticket price for the paid tickets. So instead of using that measure, we're actually going to create a new one. And so I'm going to come down here and write sum ticket price divided by sum paid ticket count. So I believe the number before was about $26 or something, average ticket price. And we're going to drag that in. And you'll notice it's significantly higher, $35.45. Obviously, when you back out what was about 1,200 comp tickets for this game, the average ticket price is taking a hit. So this is the number that we really care about. So the first thing I'm going to do, you'll notice it's just showing as a decimal. So I'm going to change how that's formatted. And so we're going to right-click here, go into Default Properties, Number Format, Currency. We always use 2 decimal places for average ticket price type measures. And anything that's like a gross revenue, we won't show the pennies. But for average ticket price, we want that. So there we go. We get the $sign, and that helps. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come here. I'm going to rename the sheet average ticket price. And then we're going to do a little bit of formatting. And again, this really helps when we go to build our dashboard later. What we're going to do is we're going to build up, might be about a dozen different sheets and combine them into one dashboard. So I'm going to double-click into the title, and I am going to bold it, and I'm going to make it green. And I'm going to center it. So we've got that. Now I can right-click on this data, and this is, it could be confusing doing this on like a one-by-one cell dashboard, but the formatting, the panes and the headers will naturally make more sense if you're doing a larger table, but because it's just one, sometimes it can be a bit confusing. And so I'm going to go into the pane, and I'm going to make this 15 as well and bold it. So I've done that, and then for the centering, I'm going to center this as well. And so what's confusing right there, you'll see, is I did center, but it still stayed over here. What's happening is you'll notice here that the width of this cell is very small. It's standard. If I made this a little bit bigger, you'd see it start to center there. We're going to switch to fit width, and now it knows to make this pane the width of the screen, and that will adjust based on the size when we put it into a dashboard. The next one we're going to do is, I think one of the more interesting uses of kind of connecting the dots inside Tableau. We're going to build something about our unsold seat data. So we're going to go and we're going to add another data source now, a text file, dimension seats right here, d_seats. You can see here it's got our seat IDs, everything. Actually, I already added that, didn't I? That's what happens when you're live. So we're going to go back into dimension seats, and the first thing I'm going to do is just create a simple measure that shows how many seats are in each price scale. So we're going to create a calculated field, and I'm going to call count seat ID number of seats. We're going to look at each price scale, and we're going to look at the number of seats. So you can see here I'm going to throw a total on this, 12,500, and that's the capacity of our stadium. And you can see it broken out. We've got 3,500 lawn seats, 1,000 SROs, and a bunch of seats elsewhere. So the next thing we're going to do is we know how many seats are in the building. Now we want to see how many are unsold, because this is going to be something that we're going to put on our dashboard, and it's going to help us kind of keep understanding how much inventory is available when we look to adjust prices. So I'm going to go over to fact sales, and I'm going to create a measure here. And so what we're going to say is number of seats. And you'll notice it understands that it's coming from a different data source. So I'm within fact sales, but it's going to the dimension seats and saying dseats dot number of seats. So it knows that it's got to kind of blend the two data sources minus some ticket count. So this is actually something, when I was going through this demo myself, I actually tripped on this, and it makes a lot more sense. We used the paid ticket count for the data on the first worksheet, but when I want to know how many seats are actually available, I have to include the comps in that. So you notice it says number of seats minus ticket count versus paid ticket count. And that's always the good thing to see in Tableau when it says the calculation is valid. So we're going to call this number of unsold seats. So we're going to go here, we're going to add it to the report. And this is something that everyone who uses Tableau will probably run into multiple times a day. That data looks bad. And what's happening is it's not doing the blending correctly because we haven't instructed it to. You see it knows the seat ID there. So this is the moment of truth. All of a sudden, that makes a lot more sense. I'm going to widen this a little bit here. So we can see that we've got 777 seats in the infield box gold, 67 here. So the next thing we're going to do is add another data source called live prices. So you see here, this is a really simple data source. This is something that would be connected to a data feed in your ticketing system. We have it as a text file for the purpose of this demo. It shows each of our price scales and how much those tickets are going for today. So I'm going to go over here. It already did the blend because it was able to match on column, on the name and the data type. And we're going to add the live price. That also, our tickets are expensive, but not that expensive. What we're going to do is we're going to come in here, and the aggregation by default is almost always sum. So we're going to come in here and we're going to change that aggregation to max. And so right there, it still says sum of live price. We have to update it here again. And when I switch it to maximum, those look a lot more reasonable. We're going to go in and we're going to change the data type on the live price from a number to a currency. We're going to include the decimals. So we have that. And then what I want to do is just remove the number of seats column. And we're going to hide the nulls that we don't have to worry about, and our terrace patio, which isn't available today. So what we've got here is a nice blended data set that includes some calculated measures, blended, and a lot of neat stuff. You'll notice here our suite number of unsold seats, 0. Both of the suites are taken in Mesa today. So I'm going to rename this unsold seats. Yep. And then as usual, I want to go in here, I want to fit the width. And right now, it might look a little weird or unnecessary, but this will be useful again when we get to the dashboard. The next thing we're going to do is instead of using the average ticket price, we are going to look at our ticket revenue. So I'm just going to right-click on here and hit duplicate. Overall, it looks good, but instead of using average ticket price, I'm going to remove this measure and add in ticket price, which is just a big square, apparently. We're going to move that into a cross tab, and that's what we wanted to see. I'm going to go back into this measure and change it to currency with no decimals and switch it to fit width. And I'm going to rename this ticket revenue. There you go. We're going to do a couple more similar things like this. Our 3 key measures are the average ticket price, the ticket revenue, and the paid ticket count. So I'm going to duplicate this again. And instead of using ticket price, put paid ticket count in there. Same kind of thing. I just need to go in here and hit fit width and rename this paid ticket count. The next thing we're going to do, and this is something I think can really help dashboards, is we're going to include a lot of metadata about this game, both from our data warehouse and from the game itself. So I'm going to add in another data source. We have this one right here called last refresh date. You can see it only has 2 columns, today's ID and then the last refresh date. So 6046 is the value from our data warehouse. That's our actual event ID today. And we have a table that says for every day, what is today's game? And it just kind of looks that up and puts it in here. And this data is accurate as of 6 minutes ago. So not really. What we're going to do is we're going to take the last refresh date and we're going to drop it into the columns. And this is kind of a different use of Tableau instead of just doing a typical cross tab, because we're going to put like an actual dimensional value in the table. We're going to do that, and then we're going to take this same thing and add it into the text. So right now that doesn't look very good. It's kind of strange. We're actually going to fit width here. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide the field label for the columns, And I'm going to uncheck, I believe, show header right here. So now all we have is just the last refresh date of the data. So I'm going to come in here and type that. And then I'm going to double click there and update the formatting again using the 15 and stuff. So we're going to format, the pane, 15, and bold it. So this is something that we're going to put on the corner of the dashboard, but I think it really helps having this data available when people look at it to understand how accurate it is. This next one is going to be the game metadata. So we're going to build another worksheet. And I'm going to go into a new data source, not a JSON file. Dimension events. So we looked at dimension seats before. You can see here dimension events. This is our spring schedule. It's only 12 games. But we have game times, game dates, opponent, day of week, a couple giveaways, just the pretty standard event metadata table that most teams would have. So what we're going to do is actually create a quick calculated field to just make the formatting a little easier. So I'm going to do this 3 times, and it's going to be similar. So it's going to say, the first one is going to be for opponent. So you notice here, I'm doing opponent plus, that's an equal sign, this. And so what this is going to do is concatenate just kind of the label with the text, and I'm going to call this metadata opponent. The next one we're going to do is for the promotion that day. Promotion. And then we're going to do a third one, which is going to be a little bit different for the event label. So we're going to say game date, event label. And don't worry, this was intentional. This calculation contains errors. We can't add a string and a date value. So what's happening is this is a text right here, but this is processed as a date. And anybody that's worked with data manipulating it know that it can definitely be confusing at times, trying to understand how things are formatted and making sure it's processed correctly. So what happens is when I imported the dimension events, I just kind of assumed everything was good. I'm going to go back to this and right-click on it and hit Edit Data Source. And this column right here, you notice it has a little calendar icon, meaning it's a date. I actually intended that to be a string. So I'm going to come down here and switch that. It looks the same to you and me, but Tableau understands to treat it a little bit differently. So we're going to go back and recreate that column. Event label. And notice that that worked. So crisis averted. So what we're going to do here is something similar to what we did with the last refresh date. And I'm going to add this to the columns. And I'm going to add the MLB opponent to the columns as well. And you start to get this kind of strange looking report, but it's going to come together. And I'm going to add the metadata promotion to the text. So you notice here, we've got all these kind of strange values. But once we join it with the today's game data and we only look at one column, it'll look a lot better. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the data tab and build a relationship. On these previous data sources, everything was going automatically because they all had the same column names and same data types. I'm going to join dimension events to last refresh date on a custom join, event ID to today's ID. Now, I know those are the same, but you can understand why Tableau wouldn't out of the box. So we do that, and we come here. And now when I go to my data source, I can blend them together. And right now, nothing's happened yet. But what we're going to do is we're going to add, let me look at my notes, last refresh date to the rows as well. So it's really only this one value where they had a match. So what I'm going to do is show the filter and uncheck the null. So now I have only the one value I want. And I can actually remove this column from the worksheet, and I can hide this as well. And when we go to fit width, this starts to look a lot better. We're going to hide the field label, and we're going to go into the header. Actually, this needs to be formatted. And we're going to align it to the left. There we go. So I've got this. And I'm going to hide the title here as well and just kind of adjust the height a little bit to make it look better. Yeah, that's what I wanted. And we're going to call this game metadata. We're going to build about 1 or 2 more tabs, and then we'll start putting the dashboard together and then try and leave some time for Q&A. So what we want to look at also are our walk-up sales, which are the sales on the day of the game. So I'm going to create a calculated field in fact sales that says if transaction date is greater than today. It also has a now feature, but I want to use today to go back to midnight. Then walk-up else pre-sale. And so walk-up flag. So what we're going to do is build something similar to kind of the sold by price scale we did earlier. We're going to look at the paid ticket count by price scale, blend them together, color it up. You can choose a lot of different color schemes. A lot of teams will either mix it up with their own team colors, opponent colors. There's a little bunch of different things. You can pick like different colors of bubble gum or whatever it is you want to use. And we're going to come in here, and what I'm going to do is filter for the walk-up flag being essentially a yes. So we built this dimension, we drag it on the filters and hit walk-up, and now we've got this. It's a much smaller set of data. We don't sell the same number of tickets on game day, but we have that here. Again, I'm going to fit it to the width. I'm going to rename this sheet walk-up sales today. Yeah. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start building the dashboard. And that's not a dashboard. So down here, Tableau has worksheets, dashboards, and you can combine everything into a story. So we're going to go into a dashboard. And so the intent of this, I'm going to use pixel perfect layout. And so I've kind of already pre-designed where I want everything to go. This is usually some of the more time-consuming part, trying to get it right. But hopefully this will work. So we're going to make it 1,000 pixels wide and 600 high, so a little bit smaller. The first thing we're going to do is take our sold by price scale and just kind of drop it onto here. Overall, it looks good. We actually want to hide the legend. And I'm going to go into the layout, and instead of just having it there, we're going to have it floating. I actually want this in our bottom left corner. So it's going to start at 0,300, and we're going to make it half the width and half the height down there in the bottom left corner. The next thing we're going to do is take our unsold seats, and we're going to drag it on here as well, same kind of thing. Layout, we're going to make it floating, and we are going to put it in the bottom right corner, so start at the half and half mark over on height and width. So we've got that. Oh, drama. Not sure what happened there. Hopefully we're good. All right, so we've got that. The next thing, and this is something I think I saw at a conference last year, Fred at the Flyers had mentioned, and I think we've adopted, is standardizing your templates and using like company logos and everything can really help adoption. And I think anybody that's trying to bring Tableau to an organization, you're trying to fight for adoption. And so in the zip file you got our circle logo. And so I'm going to add that to the dashboard real quickly. So you drag on an image. It knows there's only one picture in the folder. Notice it's bigger than the dashboard, but Tableau can scale it very nicely. So we're going to start it in the top left corner and just make it 100 pixels square. So we've got that. The next thing we're going to do is bring over our 3 kind of KPI measures. The first one is average ticket price. I'm going to drag that in here. So we see it right here at the top, 35.45. But again, we're going to make everything floating. So this one starts at 100, 100. And we've got it 300, 100 right there. We're going to have room for 3 300 pixel wide measures. Average ticket price, ticket revenue, Same thing, we're going to come in here, float it, start it. I don't know why it does that. And paid ticket count. So I'm going to go in and do the same thing, start it right there. So we've got this nice kind of clean set of data about what's going on at the game today. And then we're going to add in some of the metadata that we built. So we're going to take the last refresh date. It's over here on the left. We're going to float it. And we're going to put it at 800. Right there. Sorry. Either I'm typing poorly. There we go. And then we're going to add in that's the last refresh date, and we're going to add in the game metadata as well. Put that here. It's over here on the left. It's kind of hard to see. But once we put it where we want it to be, so we've got this. You'll notice here it's kind of hard to read. I actually intended to hide the game metadata title. So once we hide that, then you can see the data nice and cleanly. We know this game's 3-2. We're playing the Indians. We're giving away a magnetic schedule today. I'm going to come here. I'm going to rename the dashboard today's game. And when I go back into here, I can click Show Dashboard Title. And it's actually hidden back here. It's hard to see behind the logo. We're going to click into this box, and we're going to make it a little bit bigger. We're going to bold it and center it. And now we've got the label there. So this is a mostly completed dashboard. I've got about 28 more minutes. I'm going to do 2 more things and then try and open this up and see what, if anyone has any questions or anything else. All right, yep. So one thing we're going to do is we're going to build, Tableau supports a lot of different actions and kind of cool things you can do within the environment. So we are going to, this walk-up sales today chart that we built, we're going to have it so that you can, actually, I'm going to make one more measure. Sorry. So I'm going to go to the paid ticket count, and I'm going to duplicate this now. And what I'm going to do is use that walk-up flag that we built earlier and use it as a filter. 96 tickets. So we're going to say paid ticket count, walk-up sales. I'm going to go back to our dashboard and put it on the right. So we've got that. We're going to lay it here. And so it's going to start, I believe, here. We've got this. So what I'm going to do is make this something that you can click into and get more detail. So we're going to go into the dashboard. Let's see here. Worksheet actions. And what we could do is make it so that the paid ticket count walk-up sales will take you to the walk-up sales today. So by clicking on that, you can see that behavior, if I did that right. I'll have to come back to that real quickly. The other thing that we're going to do is look at our group revenue data. So I'm going to come in here and go back to fact sales. And I'm going to just start bringing in just some of our columns that maybe our group reps would care about. You know, the order number, the sales rep name, where the seat is. I'm going to go into dimension seats, grab price scale again. And then we're going to go back into fact sales and grab both ticket price and paid ticket count. So overall, we haven't blended the data yet. I'm going to do that right now. You see a lot of stuff, but you also see there's a bunch of nulls. This report's kind of not great yet. The key thing that this is missing is we have a sales type code. This currently is filtered for everything, singles, groups, packages, suites, whatever it might be. So if I go into the sales type code and filter just for groups, all of a sudden the report makes a lot more sense. You can see these are the reps, this is the price scale, the number of tickets they sold, and how much revenue they had. So we're going to come in here and rename this group revenue. One thing that's really cool, a feature that we find really useful, I'm going to make this a little bit wider, is the Tableau can support, instead of just going to a sheet, you can actually go to a URL, and you can use dimensional data as a parameter within the URL. So I'm going to go into the worksheet action. Here we go, and hit go to URL. So we're going to call this open record in CRM, and we're going to use it on just the group revenue sheet. I'm going to uncheck everything else. And so you can type in a URL, you know, salesforce.com order ID equals, and you can hit this and pick the order number. Now, obviously, this example won't work. Within our ticketing system in ProVenue, there's a long string on a URL, but you can append, like pass through the order number parameter. And you can also do that with account IDs, order numbers, anything else you'd want in a CRM system. And so that usually works really well. I'm going to put it in here. And now when you hover over a record like this, you can see right here, open record in CRM. Salesforce probably won't like that, but you get the idea for the demo. So we've got that. That's kind of the end of the Tableau demo. I was going to build 2 more measures for the ticket revenue and average ticket price today, but just because of time, I'm going to hold off. But I do want to go back to my PowerPoint and kind of review just a few of the kind of tips and practices, some that I alluded to in here and some I hadn't, and then kind of open it up. So these are just some of the best practices that we have found help us with adoption. One of the first ones is almost always publish dashboards. Like, you can take your sheets and format them, but it's the dashboards that are a lot easier to control how they're presented, especially across multiple types of devices. I think Tableau's gotten better at the desktop, mobile, tablet kind of views, but you still kind of want that control, and that's easier done on the dashboard, and that leads into the second tip. Some of our best adoption has been on mobile versions. Our Package Sales Digest, our Today's Game, a few of our other key reports all have mobile versions, and that's what people really like, especially on a game day running around the stadium. Expecting people to be at their desk on a computer just isn't realistic. One of the best uses of this similar report, and the other column that we didn't really talk about, would be the scan data. We're looking at scan data in near real time. We're on about a 15-minute delay. But that's also really useful, whether it's bobblehead days, anything else. And I think the most traffic we had to this report this year, we actually hosted a free game back in April. It was a kind of a really unique offering. We took a Tuesday night game in April that probably wouldn't have been well received and kind of turned it into a spectacle, a gift to the city. There was a lot that happened. We had about 46,000 people in the building that day. And understanding that, one, we didn't know how many people were going to show up. Like, the idea of a expected scan rate on a stadium full of comps had really never been tried before. And not really sure where people were going to go in the building. Keeping an eye on all the gates, all the scanners, just kind of everything around the building in real time was really fun. It was really cool to have this report available to us. I think it was the first time like everybody that had access really wanted to use it and understand. Obviously, the ticket prices were zero. Some of the best practices I mentioned, just kind of standardize your reporting templates, specifically adding just your company logos. I think that simple can just give people the confidence that this report is legit. You really need that buy-in for people to continuously come back to it. CDC means change data capture. That's kind of understanding when is your data changing and putting that on the report. That was the last refresh date that I used on the dashboard, and I think that's just something else that gives people confidence. And if there's ever an issue, it's a lot easier to understand. You know, you may not know that the data hasn't been updated in 4 hours if you're having a good sales day. Like, these numbers might look good. And that gives people the ability to kind of let you know, hey, this doesn't look right, and makes it easier to identify the issues. Something that we ran into, I think when we started launching Tableau, was we were kind of mixing calculations in our data sources. Like, I would add one data source, add another, and then we'd have these calculations that were relying on data sources that aren't always together. And so then when people would pull these worksheets up or pull up these data sources, they would run into issues. So just making sure that when you publish a data source, this is really the Tableau Online, Tableau server world, that you're kind of thinking about keeping every data source kind of isolated and so that it can be combined with anything. To kind of force to always use things together is usually a bad idea. I demoed those URL actions. I think those are really powerful and really easy things that you can add and can really help people use the system and drive adoption. If they're in there and they think, hey, this order doesn't look right, click it and it'll take you to your order in Salesforce so you can see maybe, look, it's because you didn't add parking or whatever it was. Something I actually didn't really highlight in this talk, but I'm finding more and more lets us be a lot more efficient, especially as our data volumes grow, is to prioritize the built-in Tableau functionality over using pre-calculated data. They have a lot of advanced features with things like running totals and window functions that let you reference other data and kind of do some really cool stuff. That's a lot more efficient than trying to pre-calculate those things ahead of time. It really, in terms of aggregations and stuff, is very powerful. We've used a lot of different BI tools at the A's, but I think what the Tableau does great is the amount of resources available online. Like, use them. Whether it's on Tableau's website or Stack Overflow or wherever, there's a lot of great stuff. I have personally found the YouTube walkthroughs especially powerful. There's people who have gone click by click, kind of like what I'm doing here, and have narrated it and showed you exactly how to do things. We followed one to build a kind of a pipeline report for our sales team and did some cool stuff that I would have never, ever thought of. And once you start doing that, you can pick and pull from other things. It's helpful. On kind of the server automation side, they have something called Tab CMD, Tableau Command Line, that you can automate a lot of stuff that you may not realize. And one of the places we use this is you can auto-generate PDFs of a dashboard and then email those to yourself. And this is a good functionality when you're in an organization that maybe doesn't have a lot of Tableau licenses. You can always subscribe to dashboards if you're a user, but this helps to get you people who wouldn't already be in your system. And we also use this for a type of day of game report that maybe we want to send to our concession partner or security partner or parking, and we're obviously not going to give them access to the Tableau system. Using the Tab CMD tools can be really helpful. I kind of glossed over this when I was talking about the sales rep group revenue data, but creating personalized reports. Tableau has the ability to filter as a user. Actually don't have it here because I'm not on Tableau Online, but whenever somebody logs in, they can only see their data if you set it up properly. This is really powerful too. Again, user adoption, getting our sales staff, for example, with the commission reporting, there's a tab that says commission report, and it's just their data. It's not like there's a drop down and they select their name and can see what all their other friends and colleagues are up to. So it's the security, the kind of ease of use is definitely powerful. And something else I kind of would run into as an issue is if you have a measure that you want to aggregate in different ways, for example, ticket price, you can sum it up or you can make it an average. I've always found it easier to duplicate the measure and then have just two separate standard aggregation methods. It's something, just building reports and stuff has been a useful tool for us. That's the end here. I have clock's coming down about 17 minutes and happy to kind of take any questions or advice. We're going to get the mics real quick. One sec. Up front. I'm going to sip of water. Soda. There we go.
When you're positioning things on the dashboard, do you just sort of get a feel for where they should go over time, or how do you? I noticed you were pretty adept at it. So.
I think in this example, I definitely scripted this out, and so I knew where I wanted everything to go. I think there's generally a flow that you'll find works, whether it's the totals or the aggregates or measures, but it's definitely report by report. I wouldn't say there's an answer to that. So, like I said in this scenario, I think it looked more organized just because I was prepared.
At my organization, it would be pretty difficult to get Tableau, and it's Nike, and they still haven't bought into it. But I wanted to know your thoughts on Microsoft's Power BI, and if you've used it in the past, and if you liked it or not. That's one of the few tools I honestly haven't really used, so I can't really speak to it. I know that it's included in a lot of Microsoft shops, by default, so the pricing
is competitive, and I understand it is a competitive tool, but I personally haven't used it.
Can you just explain, obviously you mentioned CRM is connected into Tableau. Do you guys have your data warehouse connected as well? Or do you guys prefer, saving over certain Excels or CSVs and then importing as you did today? Can you just walk us through that?
Yeah, so the standard connection is we have a data warehouse. Our ticketing system feeds into it. It has bidirectional. The CRM is a data source and a destination of data. And most of our Tableau reports connect to our data warehouse. So we're trying not to just save an Excel file and do stuff. So this demo was obviously Tableau desktop kind of for the purposes of this. But we want all of our data sources published into the Tableau Online cloud and use it that way. We have CRM data sources as well as warehouse data sources. So I think that answers the question.
Hey, thanks for the presentation. I appreciate it. This is more specific, just out of curiosity. One, it's a couple questions, there's two. One is, was there a reason why you chose to blend the data sources as opposed to, is it just because of the circumstance of the CSV files, or is it, is it joining an option that you've considered in SQL? The second question is, what was your preference choosing floating tiles over tiled? Just out of curiosity.
I'll do the second one first. I think the floating was just because it gave us pixel perfect control of where we wanted it to go. As you kind of layer and add in more things to dashboards, I think I found that was easier versus the automated side to that. So that was just personal preference. First question was about what? Yeah. Thank you. So that's something we actually spend, I think, a lot of time trying to get right. We definitely have a lot of data sources where you go in and you're not just pulling from a table, but we have a huge SQL join in the data source that's doing a lot of that ahead of time. There are definitely some features when you have kind of a nice flat data source. Tableau could do some things a lot more efficiently. I think one, I just simply chose it for the purposes of this demo. And what we're trying to do a better job of now, I think kind of the year 2, year 3 of our Tableau deployment, we want to do a better job of not just creating one very hyper-specific data source for every report, and do a better job of generalizing what we have and then joining it in the tool. And so that would be the argument to just have your fact sales, have your dimension events, dimension seats, versus all of it in one big join is the reusability. I have the slide here, 101 data sources. That's not necessarily a good thing. What if we could get that down to 30 by reusing things better? And that's something we want to do, but haven't gotten there yet.
Perfect. The question I had, we've been on Tableau a little bit. Do you have any experience with long load times with your dashboards, and do you have any thoughts about how to reduce those load times?
Yeah, I definitely think that's obviously a balance. Just curious, are you on server or online? Okay, yeah, he said desktop. So for us, it's definitely just trying to balance how much pre-aggregation to do. And that goes back to what I was saying before about reusability. So one thing we've done to improve load times is instead of having all of the transactional detail available, maybe you aggregate it up 1 or 2 levels. So, if you want to get it down to the by game, you have to go to another report. We have felt overall, I think the performance has been pretty good. We don't have massive data volumes in our Tableau Online instance. I think, 20, 30 million rows would be a big table for us on this. So the experience on using, some of the cloud services and other stuff, it might be a lot different.
Hey, Mark, big fan. I was wondering, as you have 10,000 views a week in these reports, and these things keep scaling up and up, what processes and best practices do you guys have for sort of identifying errors or bugs, and I feel like sometimes we end up having the users report back to us that, hey, this thing has stopped updating, or something changed in our code, and it's obviously not a great experience for them to have to be the one to report. So do you guys have a process that you use?
We definitely don't have a good process in place. One thing that we definitely discuss a lot is just this kind of difference. I call it, I don't know if this is even the right term, but like a hard error versus a soft error. So like, if you log into the report and there's nothing there, that's obviously, I think for most of us, a preferred outcome than it being 90% right, which is completely wrong. So we want to make sure that our data loads are set up in a way that that doesn't happen, but we still honestly rely on our users to find bugs. I think if I pulled up our Tableau logs, I think you'd see our analytics team is all the top users, so we're using it as much as they are, but we kind of rely on that. I think it's like the open source community, it's like all bugs are shallow, so if you have enough eyes on it, you'll find it, but that's not necessarily a good customer service rule.
Along those lines, how easy has Tableau been in terms of using it as an adoption tool for non-Tableau users? In terms of saying, hey, here's a tool that we're using. It's easy enough to say, give people a link and have them click through and have be there, as opposed to if it's a tool that's pretty difficult to use, you might not get the adoption you want.
Yeah, I think the idea behind that for us is, one, if it's their data, we're taking their data and putting it into a report. It's easier for them to kind of understand what's going on. And then the Tableau has kind of a complex licensing model. You see here we have about 119 users. We had about 35 when we launched. And they kind of came up with a new pricing model where they stripped away just a couple small features and cut the price about a third. And so, for better or worse, I think the way we intend, most of these users are not power users. The way we intend them to use the system is just consume the data. So it's they pull up their dashboard. There might be a couple drop downs, but it's not, the start from scratch. It's really kind of a good balance on the whole idea of self-service, and we want them to be able to get their data without having to do too much of the legwork. So I think that's been our approach.
Would you say they're pretty savvy data users, kind of within the people you're approaching, whether it's kind of like the head of sales? You're not trying to really kind of get someone who's almost not data savvy at all and have them use data.
Yeah, no, I don't think we would try and take our least data savvy people and just kind of drop it on them. I think obviously we've had some really good adopters both in sales, marketing, finance, who want this, and they find it saves them time. And then if we have people who aren't as comfortable with it, we'll try and streamline the process for them and help them along. But the adoption is definitely higher among the people who are more comfortable with this kind of world. We definitely have a lot of people who they go into Tableau, download the CSV, and then go back to Excel. So to them, Tableau is a data source in and of itself versus the output. But I'm still okay with that because we're kind of controlling the data flow still versus however they were getting data before.
Thanks. You talked briefly about actions. How much experience or how much success have you had with drill downs, like dynamic drill downs? And at what level, or do people use this, or is it just not worth it?
It isn't something that we've used heavily. We've actually built that out on our seat hierarchy. So you could just see the upper bowl and drill down and see all of the sections inside that and built out hierarchies. But it isn't something we've made a priority, to be honest. That's it. I know it's lunchtime, so thank you.